right, all right. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Digital Recruiter Podcast. I am your host, Clark Wilcox, and I am really excited about today's guest. It's a hot button topic, and we have a really interesting way that we connected on LinkedIn a couple months ago. His name is Darren Koontz, founder of Mavik Ventures, and the CEO of Mavik Ventures. It's a leading recruiting firm specialized in building custom TA solutions for clients through on-call, RPO, and contingent recruiting models. He's been in the industry for 10 plus years. He went to Boise State, where he played college football as a defensive lineman when they were really good. They were the Boise State, right? They say the Ohio State out here. And he's got some hot takes on people who are giving advice to recruiters and recruiting coaches. And I took up the challenge of, hey, come on my podcast and let's talk about it. So I'm happy to have him here. And Darren, thanks, man, for being here.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. Well, we'll kind of build up the backstory a little bit because you got a good one. You've had a ton of success. So to kind of give listeners an idea of who you are, and then we'll kind of get into some of the stuff in the post that connected us. But let's just start off. Like, how'd you get into recruiting?
Yeah, God, I probably have a random story just like everybody else, right? No one sought out and said like, "Hey, I'm going to be a recruiter," right?
Yep, yep.
No, when I was playing football at Boise State, one of the girls I knew well there, she played soccer there, was a year older than me, and when she graduated, she went to a recruiting firm that was locally out here. And so when I was done playing, kind of trying to go the NFL route, that didn't work out. She had reached out and just kind of said, "Hey, you'd be great, to kind of come into recruiting, you should check it out." And at that time, I was like, "Listen, I've been doing football since like freshman year of high school. I just want to go sit and stare at a wall for like 3 months and do nothing." Of course, like 2 weeks of staring at a wall just like grinds you down, and you're ready to get into something, get back to the routine. So, I went and interviewed there and started recruiting at a contingent shop in Boise, where we focus specifically in the tech area in San Francisco.
Nice, nice. And so, were you placing? So it's contingent. Were you doing like all engineers, engineering, sales, like whatever a startup or a tech company kind of needed, or?
Yeah, yeah. So we were broken up in teams there. It's like my team, we did all engineering. So all
Okay.
SFA area engineering. We had teams that would do just product, just sales, and stuff like that. Obviously, the engineering was the hot ticket there. That was kind of like just the most aggressive, kind of high pace, fast pace environment. I was probably one of the weirdos that like liked it. I loved it. It was one of those where people are just like, "Oh, this like contingent recruiting stuff sucks." It's, you having to do BD all the time or constantly just compete. Getting beat out on stuff. But I always, to me, it was like gambling almost, right? Where you're like, you kind of like you're playing a hand each time. You're playing a hand each time you get a good candidate, and just kind of seeing where it turns out to, and learning kind of a lot of the psychology behind really taking candidates through the process. Working with different types of companies and stuff like that, and the ways that you can kind of influence the outcomes that you're wanting, and making sure that they're aligned with obviously what candidate and company want and are looking for out of that hire too.
It's interesting you say that. I think the interesting point, like you're gamifying it a little bit, right?
Yeah,
I think the best recruiters and salespeople I talk to, they kind of always had that. They look at it as a game, like you treat it seriously, right? Like the game is like, how can I be really dialed in with my candidate communication and getting the right people and being transparent and not creating a bunch of headaches for myself, right? By
yeah,
pissing people off or anything else like that, clients or candidates. Like you kind of gamify it. You get it better. You said the psychology or what did I do here? How can I do better? And if you gamify it with combined with like some real, I think, radical like self like honesty and
yeah,
awareness, it actually gets really fun. But you also become so much. I mean, I was like you, but I had to become way better as a person because it
yeah,
exposed so many of my weaknesses when I started recruiting. I was like, I am not 10% of what I think I am in my head. Like I'm getting exposed brutally. And I had some success early, but you kind of have to face yourself and be like, do I want to improve as like a person as this, or am I okay kind of doing the stock recruiting answer and I care more about other people and yada 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 versus
yeah.
actually like doing it, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's one of the things I think it's the coolest thing when we hire new recruiters, like people that haven't ever recruited before, we're training them from the ground up and stuff, and you just start seeing those changes in their personal life. Like you'll see them around like their friends or family, and just how they're talking, kind of their confidence come out and stuff. It's crazy to see just like how drastically, like even people that have kind of come in a little like timid and shy, you can just kind of tell that's probably how they are outside of work too, to then being like the leader of their friends group, or the one that's always just like making the charge. It's what we're doing, and you just see that confidence build, and it's so rewarding to be able to see it. It's awesome. Like whenever you start seeing that way with people, and you just start seeing them develop and everything, and it's
Yeah.
really cool to see just that impact and just how those little things just change not just their work, their career, how they make money, but just everything else in their life.
it's why I do what I do because it's
Yeah,
given me so much that I had no. I mean, I always call kind of agency recruiting is like the island of misfit toys, a little because everyone has this story. I don't know how I got here or how I got into recruiting, but this happened. It's like this
yeah,
windy road of like, well, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? Like that's like the theme. That's like the LinkedIn headline for agency recruiters.
yeah,
Like I don't know, recruiting, right?
yeah,
But it does. It's if you don't have a little bit of that as kind of like that career identity, right? That's not
yeah,
your career isn't your whole self, but you want that, right? Piece of like,
yeah,
well, what am I good at? How can I make money in the market? And kind of if you don't have that, and I didn't really have that going into recruiting, I was just trying to figure things out, and that's fine to like do things to figure out what you don't want to do, but it's really nice when you figure out something that you actually do want to do, and that brings out
yeah,
those things in you, and like that's I mean, that's when it gets fun. You're like, oh,
yeah.
like I could do this, and then you start to see some of the margins and everything else. You're like, okay, like let's, this is
It all
sweet.
makes sense.
Yeah, this
Well,
is
yeah,
sweet. Yeah,
recruiting is a job that, yeah, you go tell your grandparents, and they're like, "What are you doing?" You're like, "Oh, I'm a recruiter," and they're gonna be like, "Oh, that's cool. Like, what are you gonna do next?" And you're like, "No, like I'm actually doing really well, right?" And they're just like, they don't know about it. And so it's always that kind of like job that people just don't really understand or don't really know, or they had a friend's cousin's dog that recruited once and didn't like it, so they heard it's a bad thing to do or
yeah,
something. But yeah, it's cool to see just like the possibilities and things like that. And I think a lot of people get into it and just realize like, they can come in, make a lot of money doing it, be really successful at it. And, we talk with a lot of people about like, really where we see people make the turn in recruiting. And I would say this probably for anything is making it a career, not a job, and a lot of people, and it doesn't need to be some big fancy job that's your career, right? I mean, I know people that are bartenders that like made a career out of it, right? They manage bars all over the place, super high level, do very well doing that. So it could be any type of job necessarily, but it's like when you make that like mental note to say like I'm making this my career, and how I break that up is like when you start investing time outside of like when you're supposed to be in the office, like to further what you can do, further your skill set and like learn and train and like make that conscious decision of like how am I going to get better? Like where are my weaknesses? What are my strengths? How can I start improving on those weaknesses day by day? Let's pick one and spend the next 2 months just improving that weakness, making it not a weakness anymore, and now I'll focus on the next one. And be able to just take that step by step is like where people make that switch of now this is a career.
yeah.
It's a long term thing that they're looking to grow and develop themselves into.
It's such a good point. I've been really harping on that recently because I've been really evaluating the last couple of years who's had the most success in the program, who hasn't had as much success. And I'll be honest with that stuff. We're going to talk about that more later on. It's the ones that dip their toe in the water, or they don't go all
Yeah,
in, or they don't respect how hard this is, but how also rewarding it can be on the other side. And it's going to kind of forge you in a sense. And yeah,
yeah,
we're never going to get respect at the Thanksgiving table, right? We're always going to be Rodney Dangerfield, right? Like the no
yeah,
respect, right? Like we're always going to be that, and that's you just have to embrace it. It's like
yeah. Oh yeah,
you know
yeah.
what,
It's
we're gonna
great.
get no respect, but maybe we'll have maybe we'll have a nicer house. Not that that
Yeah,
matters. It doesn't
yeah.
matter.
They'll be
But
eating Thanksgiving at your table.
yeah, this is like an agency recruiter joke, right? With listeners and all of us here, like you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Like you don't have to be arrogant. You don't brag or anything like that. It's just like okay, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, enjoy that.
Yep.
Enjoy that job. Like we'll get it. Like that's fine. Yeah. And so like yeah, you're a lawyer. That's great. You work triple the hours that I do, and all that stuff. So
Make less typically.
it's all good. So now I'm gonna get a bunch of lawyers in my inbox,
Yeah, right. Just hate on you.
debating me. What have I done? We gotta edit that out. But
Yeah,
so well, I don't want to get too off track because I could. There's a million things we could talk about, but I think one thing is would be really cool to hear. Aerotech loved hiring athletes in general and college athletes, and you were obviously on a team that was extremely successful when you were there in college. And we don't have to make this a sports podcast, but talk to me about. Although I kind of would love to, but talk
we
to
could do
me
deep there.
about. We could talk all day. How did that help you? Just that everything you high school football, college football. How did that help you and prepare you in going in recruiting?
Yeah, no, there's just so many transferable skills, right? And I think just, whether someone's played, at a high level in high school, maybe they play in college or college or the pros and stuff, like just to me I think the reason people like hiring athletes is there's so many of those intangibles that it shows, like, the work ethic, hard workers, dedication, they work together on a team, they're typically not the people that are just going to give up and quit when something gets tough and stuff. So I think they just a lot of those things transfer over well. Probably the same thing out of people out of the military, coming into workforces and stuff like that. Like you just know, like, okay, if they didn't get kicked out of there, like, and were successful there, like they have all these attributes. Now we can just teach them what we need to teach them to be successful at this job, and stuff. And so I think that carried over so well. And you see a lot of athletes that just tend out to go out and be really successful, because of that. And it's one of the things that we look for with a lot of people is just that, like, just that openness to, kind of low ego openness to being like, I'll play the role I need to play on the team right now, and I want to understand what my growth is and be able to grow. If you're not happy with your situation, you're going to change it. You're not just going to complain about it, and stuff like that. And you're going to work harder to change that situation. If you're not getting enough playing time on the field, you're not going to sit there and go complain to your coach. You're going to go work harder, and go earn that. And so I think you just get a lot of those things out of people that have just played at high level athletics and stuff like that, that just transfer over. And those are just, that's how they're wired.
Yeah, it's that just that ownership.
Yeah.
I mean, as you said, the ownership, the resiliency, I think are two things that I actually learned from like the college athletes that I worked with, and there was people in the office that were so disciplined. Like I was a
Yeah.
mess when I started. I was not that at all. I had suit pants, but a regular sport jacket. Like I was paying for gas to my interview in pennies and dimes. Like I was a mess. And because I kept getting my commissions taken from the telecom company because the installs were late, like I was a disaster.
Yeah.
But I learned honestly from people like you in the office. I was like, oh, that's how you have to be a professional, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't come in with that college athletic background. I was lazy in college and all that. Like I admit it. Like I had to learn it, but that's also why I love recruiting because those talented people came in. But I could be on an even playing field. Like they were
Yeah.
disciplined, and I learned that. But I was beating them on the spread report. And
Yeah.
so like that was what fun is like I could still win, but then I also got to learn how to be more of a professional and like everything
Yeah.
else. And like, oh, like you probably should take a little time to invest in your wardrobe and everything else because like that's gonna help round out, as you said, shore up your weaknesses, right?
Yeah.
Level up your strength. That's what I love because I got to work around college athletes like you and all that were super like just like on it every time. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that's what it takes, right? And
Yeah.
I also realized like what I probably would never be like in a sense, or like what I don't like
Yeah.
to do. I'm not gonna wake up at 6 a.m. and start making cold calls. That'll never be who I am. It's part of the reason I created a digital recruiter,
Yeah.
right? It's just like I'm not a morning person. Like I gotta be now because of the little guy, and like I'm
Yeah.
working through it. But like, some people are just like that 8 a.m. making cold calls. I'm like, damn,
Yeah.
like good for you. Right? Again,
Yeah.
college athletes. I'm like, man, you guys are just on it in the weight room at 5 a.m. All this stuff. I'm like, so much respect. Right?
Yeah.
And it's like I was in the video room, like with the video coordinators and all that. Like that's what I was doing in Florida. Like that was a whole different deal. So
Yeah. It's
it's yeah,
wild.
much respect, much respect. Um, so 5 years goes by, right? You start your company 2008, like about 5 years in to all this.
Yeah, I
What?
think I was, just over 6 or almost 7 or something like that. And then I started, like, I think it was like September 2018,
Yeah,
when we started kind of officially launched Mavik Ventures. And when I say we, me, right? You just we have a
yeah,
company now. I'm an LLC. Let's do it. But yeah, I left the firm I was at, and just to me, I just felt like there's kind of a missed opportunity in the market. You saw, all I focused is heavily like engineering, tech, in the Bay Area, which, engineering and tech is probably the most, aggressive, combative, probably like space to recruit in. And then
yeah,
you throw in the Bay Area, that's probably the most, highest competition in that space, especially going through those years. I mean, that was 2000. I started there in like 2013, left in 2018. But I just kind of took a lot of the things we had learned, and the missed opportunity I thought I saw is like a lot of companies, obviously they have their internal recruiting teams, right? And then, it's either that or they might partner with like an RPO. That was usually probably larger, more enterprise type companies. And then, from their internal team, the extension to that was, contingent recruiters or retained recruiters and stuff like that. You'd see like kind of freelance contractors that would bounce into startups every few months. And so I really wanted to kind of take that. I guess the best way to explain it now would be like the RPO approach, but kind of take it from like the external kind of contingent mindset that we came from, and put this model in there that just really gave these startups the flexibility to literally they can start us tomorrow, stop us, start us today, stop us tomorrow. Obviously, that's not ideal for us, not ideal for them, but like we really needed. To me, it was important to have the full flexibility, so they have the ownership and ability to, if things change rapidly, like we all know they can get out of it, they can pause, they can bring us back on when they need to and stuff. And so I think we had kind of the benefit of ignorance, right? Like we're coming from the contingent space. We're not used to a big long term, contracts and everything like that. And the RPO world, they're like, you guys are idiots, you want big long-term contracts. Why are you giving this away for, for the flexibility? And so we really wanted to push and kind of form that out. And so we initially kind of went at it thinking like this will replace contingent recruiting in a way, right? Like, we can jump into a company. I can come in there and sit as an internal recruiter just on an hourly rate, no placement fees, and help hire 10 people in the next 3, 4, 5 months, versus what they would pay someone contingently to do that. And what we quickly saw was that if anything, it went more and attacked kind of the internal recruiter, probably the typical person that would just be an internal recruiter, because a lot of these teams started saying, wait a second, I don't need 5, 6, 7 recruiters on my team. Maybe I'll keep 1 or 2 core recruiters that can handle, 30 to 50% of the hiring needs, and we'll use, the Mavik team and kind of just flex up as we need to. We know the quality, we know exactly what they're going to do and how they work and stuff like that. And so they can just come in, step in for as long term or short term as they need. I mean, we've had clients that will come in and help them hire for, whatever amount of roles they have, for might take a few months, and they pause us. The next quarter when they hire again, they come right back. We have some clients that have had 4 recruiters with them for the last 3.5 years, nonstop, with no break in between. So it'd be like more like probably a traditional RPO, but they just do it through on call, and they kind of have the flexibility if they wanted to stop, and stuff like that. So that's where like our first kind of approach was. And so it was a lot of it was educating the market. Like I spent probably 9 months I was calling all these RPO firms and like pretending to be this little like ag tech startup, out of like Idaho, and I'm just like, yeah, I just want to learn how your model's working. So I'm like, someone's got to be doing this, right? And you'd kind of see it, like on demand wasn't all over the place back then at all. It's funny, you start seeing a lot of these firms that start saying, oh, we've been doing this for years. They go back in their posts on LinkedIn. They were not talking about it in 2018, 2019. They started talking about it in 2020, 2021.
Yeah.
We kind of proved the use case, right? It was a lot of companies at first just like, we kind of want this, or we don't know. But then I think a lot just started seeing the value, and it's, it was one of those. It took probably like 6, 7, 8 months. We were just doing contingent stuff in the meantime, trying to convert companies, and it was just kind of like, I love the idea, but we're doing what we're doing, kind of thing. And I think we converted our first to on call after like 8 months of trying to convert these companies to on call, and then within like 2 months, we had converted like 16 others. So I mean, it just went. It was one of those just like, you do it once, now you have that case study to talk about, right? And you reference that, and then it just kind of snowballed. And so that was pretty much like 2019 through COVID. We held on pretty strong through there. Honestly kind of did better in COVID, just because a lot of companies that said like we're slowing down, obviously letting go of a lot of people, and stuff like that, but we still need someone here to kind of like have eyes on, would kind of just keep us there, keep one of our recruiters there, just kind of handle anything that happened, or if someone left that they needed, and stuff like that. It just kind of scaled from there. So that was kind of our initial like entry point, if you will. And then from there, we built out our contingent teams. That was pretty, straightforward and easy. That's kind of the world we came from. And then obviously more recently building out our RPO, and have brought, experts in from that world to kind of come and just scale that out here. So we kind of look at Mavik Ventures kind of has like 3 business models, or, avenues that all like survive independently, but also for the recruiters kind of allow a lot of opportunity for them to earn in different areas just based off what the market's doing.
Interesting. So you got recruiters that could kind of be cross trained or impact different models on
Yeah.
your team, right? And so okay, so that's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, because our RPO and on call are very similar, right?
Yep.
To us, it's more of just a term, right? If you will, it's kind of just the flexibility. So it's kind of the same. And then for the contingent side, obviously, it creates a good opportunity to earn. If there's ever downtime on those sides, and recruiters want to step in and help on, some of the contingent teams. So kind of shares the wealth in a way, and allows kind of recruiters to have the opportunity to earn in different areas, depending on what
I
they
love
want
it.
to do.
Yeah, no, that's great, and we just have building out the team that we're building now, kind of seeing that as well, right? People
Yeah,
have different priorities or different things. There's also timing, right? One month they want to do this, one month they want to do something else. So
yeah,
it's good to have that flexibility. One thing that was really interesting when you were talking was how much you listen to the market, that you just got to know the market and you got to call them, and that's one of the things I harp on all the time. I did a LinkedIn live on this earlier, was like, figure out your value prop,
yeah,
figure out your ICP, and go get to know them,
yeah,
right? Stop trying to just get Rex right away or get paid right away. Like, go
yeah,
get to know them, get to know their problems. So like, you like listening. I mean, talk to, like, what did you learn through all that? And as you said, 1 and then 16 happens. I think people missed
yeah,
it. Like, it's so much work to get that one, and then you can leverage that to kind of keep building,
yeah.
right? But like, talk about that process, almost like that market research process.
Yeah, I think it was honestly going into it. I mean, it was taking a lot of time, and we were calling. I reached out to a lot of the VC firms I've worked with over the years and had a lot of good relationships with a lot of the founders, executives at the startups, and a lot of it was just like, hey, this is what we're looking to do. Like, rip it apart. Tell me what you love about it. Tell me what you hate about it. Like, it's kind of one of those. It doesn't matter what I think's a good idea. It matters what your customer thinks is a good idea, right? And and
Yes.
and it might be saying the same thing, but this way, when you say it this way, just clicks better, right? Hence on call versus on demand. I mean, that little, we were pushing it as, hey, it's on demand at first, and we made the switch to on call, just renaming it. And I think literally we had like four companies that had said no to us like a month earlier, and we're like, reach back out, and there's on call recruiting now, and they're like, hell yeah, let's go. And you're like, okay, that
What?
makes no sense.
Yeah.
Trying to like figure out that one. You're like, I don't really know what to take from that, but cool. I just think it's so important that if you have a good idea, and it doesn't have to be like we're bringing some novel thing, right? I kind of tell everyone, I'm like, we didn't reinvent the wheel. We kind of put our own coat of paint on it, right? And so it's so important to just sit there and like understand what you think the market wants, what you think could benefit that, what pain points you think they have, but also be open to listening, because there's a good chance that you're wrong, or there's actually these other pain points that you just don't realize or haven't seen yet. And so it's important to be able to sit there and like get out of your own way sometimes and be like, okay, like I don't agree with that, but that's the feedback I was looking for. Like, how, let's take that in and see. Like, obviously that means something. It doesn't matter, if I don't think it's right, the customer does. So how do we just always take that in, and we just constantly refine it? Like, what it is today is not what it started at. Like, pricing models and everything is just always just, we've adjusted and changed it, and kind of a lot of times took the risk and said, let's try this, right? Let's go try it. Like, let's go market test it a bit and see what happens, what works well, what doesn't. Let's throw away the stuff that doesn't work well and just keep refining, right? And so it's a whole process where it wasn't just like we woke up one morning and said like, hey, wow, this epiphany, we're going to do exactly this, and this is how we're going to do it. It's just going in there, having the resiliency, having the adaptability to be able to just sit there and be like, let's just figure this out. Like, hey, let's figure out what they want and how to get it to them, and what makes sense to kind of do all that, and make sure that it's a good thing for the client. It's a good thing for us, the recruiters, the recruiting firm. Like, it all needs to sync and kind of work together.
Be a win-win-win type
Yeah,
situation.
100%. Yeah,
And it's you brought up some great. I mean, there's some great points there of terms of just again the listening and then what you said. Like you might be wrong, and
yeah,
removing your ego from it. And it's not that necessarily the client's always right, but the, the market is in a
yeah,
sense, right? Like it's like if you get the same feedback and there's a common denominator, so
yeah,
like, maybe I should go in this direction or I should talk about this. Like when writing content, I always say like your sales calls and your client fulfillment calls are going to give you all the content ideas
yeah,
you ever need.
yeah,
Like because that's the pain points, and then you just figure out the ones that keep coming up, and that's what you
yeah,
write about. Like that's the themes in your business and
100%.
the content. And you mentioned earlier like the importance of training and investing, and you mentioned working through this process. How do you balance the time, or how did you balance the time between learning this but also still trying to make money and make placements versus
Yeah,
actually like taking what you've learned and like rebuilding processes around it? Because
yeah,
there's a lot to do, right? It's hard to sail the ship and kind of build it at the same time,
yeah.
right? So how did you kind of approach that as an owner?
Yeah, it gets tough, and that's what I think a lot of people. It really comes into like you have to be willing to put in the work, 100%, full stop. Nobody's going to do it for you. No one's going to come in and be like, hey, I really like you, so let me help. And stuff like that. And we wish that would happen, but it honestly, I think it's just you kind of take like, okay, here's a big complex problem, or here's what we're trying to get you. Like, don't just look at that, right? Like, let's break that down into like smaller, simpler solutions that we can go. Okay, this is kind of how we like strategically like do this and then this and take these steps and kind of keep working towards that, and be open to adjusting and pivoting on the way, right? And that's the thing. I talk with a lot of people about it, where they're just like, well, we could, well, if I go hire people, then it's going to take away from me producing. And I'm like, well, that's your choice, right? Like, I get it. It's going to be tough, but like, you're choosing to just not do something because you're going to do something else, and like, or you could just work hard. Like, I get it. There's only so many hours in the day, and that's where I'm not saying like, oh, you're just not cut out, or don't, you're not working hard enough, but like, that's the dedication it needs to take. If you're going to sit there and be like, hey, it's going to take me time, we're going to hire someone, I need to learn how to train them and get them up to speed, but I still need to produce, like that, the equation, there's not an equation that just allows that to work if you're not just adding more time and effort into it, right?
Yeah.
That's the only answer that you have to do. And so for a lot of that, it was, went out, like I was generating, all the revenue when we first started. I was working all the accounts. I was just doing everything, bringing in the other recruiters that we hired, training them at the same time, to get up to speed and working with them on that. And I mean, it was a lot. And to be able to like put that all together, just, you kind of just take one step at a time, right? And just kind of start, okay, what do we have to get? Like if we want to do 500,000, as a company, what do we need? How many clients do we need? Well, let's work backwards from that. How do we get to that? We want to hit 1 million. We want to hit 5 million. Like, what do we need to do to get there? And then just always kind of plan for those. To me, like I'm a big planner, I'm a big numbers guy, so I like being able to sit there and just be like, okay, if we want to get to here, like, okay, this is how we work backwards and get to that. So like, what do we need to do to start taking those steps? Right? You're not going to do it tomorrow. And again, it's the we're kind of in a culture of people just want it instantly, fast, quick, good, all that, and it's just not the reality. And so I always tell people, like anyone trying to start anything on their own, like first off, whether it fails or it's successful, like do it, jump in with both feet because you're going to learn so much. That's how we learn is from our failures. You got to take from it, look at it and just say, what could I have done better? What did I do well? And then move on from it. But you have to be okay with just going out there and failing and trying something. It's kind of like when we were kind of pressure testing the models, or when a recruiter comes and says, hey, I want to go after these types of companies. I'm like, well, great, go do it. Like, tell me how it works. Tell me if I need to help or step in, but like, you just have to go do it. Like, we're not going to be like, oh yeah, let's just pivot the whole company and do this now because someone thought of an idea. Like, go market test it, go prove it, bring it back. And if it works, 100%, let's implement it. But you just have to be willing to go out there and try something and be okay with it not working, right? And failing and learning from it.
And sometimes that is where you get to the answer, right? All these
Yeah,
books and stories you read, right? Oh, it didn't work, and
yeah,
what Jordan gets cut from his high school team,
yeah,
and Brady gets benched at Michigan, and all this other stuff. Like it just kept going, and
yeah,
that you figure out greatness in those moments where you
yeah,
choose to accept it as failure, or it's like, all right, I just got to keep going, and just
yeah,
like ideas are meant to be tested and broken and reiterated, and just embracing that
yeah,
process and doing the work is, again, we're going to come back to that theme over and over. It's
yeah,
like, yeah, you have the choice. I think what you said is so powerful. I think some people try to outsource their decision making, right? Oh,
yeah,
well, this happened or that happened. Like, no, it was your choice. Like,
yeah,
you chose to have a lifestyle business, or you chose to scale and it
yeah,
didn't work the first time, and that's okay.
yeah,
Like that, it truly is okay. I mean, that's what I've been interested to talk to people like you and other just like successful owners. It's just this. There's not a smooth ride here.
yeah,
It's just not. It can be extremely fruitful ride,
yeah,
but it's not. It's not smooth. And like you
yeah,
shouldn't expect it to be. Like you should embrace the challenges. And I know, I talked to Lauren and Christina, my team members. I'm like, yeah, we're in it, but like, man, I love our problems, like in a sense, right? Like because I know I can solve these problems.
yeah,
Thank God. Like I hated being in jobs where I didn't know what I was doing. Like I was a
yeah,
director's assistant in LA for a commercial production company. You talk about fish out of water. I had no idea what I was doing, how to operate the camera. I was like, oh, I got into video coordinating in football because of the football, not because of the video. And
yeah,
so
right,
like I learned real quick. And they're like, yeah, I don't think this is working out. I was like, I also agree with that statement.
yeah,
So I was like, I'm happy that I have problems now that I know how to solve, or I can like work to the solution and build. And it's not always going to get to the market immediately, but sometimes
yeah,
it's just fun solving the problem. If I look back
yeah,
at the most fun times, it was like right before we hit like a big peak in revenue, but it was actually, I was like, oh, we solved it. Like I know this is gonna work. Like it's
yeah,
all right there. It's going to the right direction. Like to me, that's like always been those moments.
yeah,
Like that. I just like remember. I'm like, we were right there. Like no one believed in us, right? Rodney Dangerfield, we're misfits, and then it freaking works, and people are like, "You're amazing." I was like, "Well,
yeah,
yeah, thank you.
yeah,
I'm not," but like, it's like a lot of work went into like making that happen. It's like I'm glad the market resonated because that is such a validating feeling when you
yeah,
get something together that the market wants and that is like that you solved it. So
yeah. Yeah, it's one of the things. It's just so funny. You can use that like creative part of your brain, right? And really look at, just be like, okay, what is, the most successful companies we all know of. They are rarely the one that just thought of this great idea and just like all of a sudden that's what they became. It's they kind of, someone's tried it before. I mean, even look at like the tablet, right? Like everyone thinks of the iPad. HP had a tablet out in the '90s that flopped, and even in the early 2000s when the iPads were out and people were like, the HP tablet's actually still pretty legit. It just, it was ahead of its time.
Yeah.
And you look at it, just like so many companies or businesses have kind of like, they stood on the shoulders of the ones that didn't make it, right? Or they went, you should leverage that, right? If you know, hey, well, they got here, so we can look at that. What did they do to get there? What did they do well? What didn't they? And let's take off from where they went. Let's not start where they started again. Like, we have the opportunity now, because they tried, that we can kind of learn from their mistakes and grow from there. And so you're kind of starting from where the last person left off in a way, which is huge. But yeah, it's just having to be able to go out there and just put the effort in and try it, right? And just knowing that, listen, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to do whatever I have to do. And that's with starting the business, right? A lot of people are like, wasn't that stressful or this? And I'm like, not really. Like, yeah, there's stress in there, and stuff like that. But I don't know. I just have the mindset, like, went into it just like, well, it's going to suck. It's going to be tough. There's going to be answers I don't know that I'm going to have to figure out. But like, I won't give up. Like, I know personally, I will do whatever I have to do to make this successful. And so when you kind of go into it with just that confidence, right? Like, nothing's going to be bad, right? Because I'm already expecting it to suck. I'm already expecting it to be tough, So I'm just going to like work through that. And I know I'm not the person that's going to quit or give up, and I'm just going to keep going. And so when you're like that, it just kind of you're just like, okay, we'll figure it
Well,
out.
it's like being like a caged lion versus out being out in the
Yeah,
safari. Like,
yeah,
it's for me being an aerotech, I got so much value there, but after a while, I was like, I'm a caged lion, and that drives me nuts.
yeah,
And I was like, I gotta get out on my own and just explore and just see if I can make it in the desert, in the jungle,
yeah,
like and go make it happen. And there's just like a thrill there, and adrenaline that it's like it's all on me
yeah,
to make it happen. Now I have an awesome team and everything else, and we're all invested together. But when you're
yeah,
starting out, it is lonely, right? They
yeah,
say it's lonely at the top. Well, hell, it's lonely starting out too.
yeah,
When everyone's mocking you, what do you do again? Oh, you post online. Oh, that's
yeah.
cute. Like all that stuff. Like people read that. Like
It's
I got
at the
people are
top
like,
of
oh,
the
you got
bottom.
a podcast now? Like that's sweet. Like it's like what? Like it makes those all that stuff. Like yeah. Like I
Yeah,
mean, it molds you for sure.
yeah,
But it's just like, and there's some of us and people listening to this like they have that feeling of just like get out like I gotta just be free. That freedom is worth
yeah,
a pay cut or whatever an initial because I don't care. It's just like that's how I got it. Only so many years. Not really. I don't know how many I got, but like I'm gonna spend it trying to solve problems that I think are fun and
yeah,
creative and kind of with my voice and my vision. You're the same way, and I know how hard it is to sell different pricing models and to talk about that and client education. Like it is a heck of a task
yeah.
and then to get team buy-in and then manage all those team, and manage all those people. So yeah, it's I mean it's nuts, but it's so worth it at the same
One hundred
time.
percent, yeah. It's just so rewarding, right? To kind of just start seeing some of the things that you kind of put out there and say like, this is where I want to go, right? These are the
Yeah,
steps I want to take, and you start just seeing, that mission being accomplished to or and you kind of start stepping towards that and you come across just some amazing people, right? Like I'm sure the people you've hired on your team, you've brought in, like there's just people where it's like I would have never met you, I would have never come across you, we would have never had this conversation, or people you're hiring where you're just like, if you didn't put yourself out there and say I'm going to start building this thing, right? Like it's insane, just the connections you make, the types of people you get to interact with and stuff like that. And I think that's one, I mean, recruiting in general, to me especially, it's just like you're like, well, what's so exciting about it? Like, you get to talk to the most interesting people every single day. Like, it
yes,
is fascinating, and you get to work with really cool companies and kind of, you're working with companies like, SoFi, for instance, working with them like super early when they were just like a small team. And then you see, and you're kind of like, that was really cool to see it just like, okay, that was like some little like bootstrap startup to get their Series A at the time. And now they're, SoFi, right? Name of the Charter Stadium and all that. And you're like, dude, it was pretty cool to like just
that's
see
nuts.
like
Yeah,
that whole progression in a way and just kind of experience that. I think like it's just so rewarding to do that.
I'm with you. I mean, the people I work with now, they've changed my life.
Yeah.
Honestly, when I think of like a Christina and a Lauren and a Kevin, and I mean, it's in partnering with Lauren this year, who was a digital recruiter client on the agency. Like now, my wife is helping the
Yeah.
agency with sourcing and screening. And it's changed her life and
Yeah.
everything. Just a down like, and that's so rewarding to see. And everything else, just like her being able to run with that, and just now I have like different, with Ross and Kevin on the content team, and like the roles that they're adding. They're enriching my life and career so
Yeah.
much, and they're also I'm able to like diversify the workload and
Yeah.
give them things that are not my strengths that are their strengths, and to see that then flourish. I was like, oh, I had this vision, but I couldn't do it all. I couldn't give that the time it needed. But if I put it in their hands, they're ideally suited to run with it. And then that
Yeah.
takes off as part of the business. I'm like, wow, like that is cool. Like, and start to see
Yeah,
stuff like that. I'm sure you have that too, like as well, and just like, wow, you start to see like the sum become bigger than the parts. Like you
yeah.
start to see those, you're like, whoa, like this is
It,
crazy. It's like, wait, what else
yeah,
could we do? Yeah,
it's wild when you start. Yeah, it's all about when you're leveling up your team, right? Like you're bringing people in and they have strengths that you don't have, right? And it's all about having the confidence in that vision of saying these are the things we need to build, these are the things I think we need here, and you just start. Some of it's just organic, right? People just fall into their positions there, and you're just like, it's just amazing to see. I mean, some of the best ideas we've had have come from other recruiters, other team members on our team that have just been like, hey, like, what if we tried this? And we're like, great, let's try it. Let's try it. If it works, let's implement it. And stuff. And we tell our team that all the time. I mean, they're amazing, and it's one of those like it's all a company's all about their people, right? Like that is what it is. It is the most important factor in a company surviving or not. Over money, over anything else, is the people you have there. That's what's going to allow you to get money and earn money and stuff like that. And I feel like a lot of companies end up taking the people for granted, right? When like that's your real asset.
yeah,
But it's been so cool to see, people that we've had here that come up with just some like brilliant ideas and like of different approaches. And I think we've just kind of had that culture of just like, allowing people to just like openly, like, if you have an idea, like, don't assume I've thought about it, right? Like, there's a good chance you're going to think of something. I'm gonna be like, that's a really good idea. I should have thought about that. I did not. Like, perfect. Let's figure it out. And so I think kind of having that openness and kind of like where everyone has a voice and they should. And, we kind of give people the opportunity to do that too and have like quarterly meetings and stuff like that. And we'll do a lot of development stuff with the teams and kind of just give people the opportunity to go, hey, go learn something new and go teach it to us, right?
yeah.
Go take the weekend and go just put it like 3 slides together about React. What is it, right? And just explain it to us. Present it to the team. Present it to everybody. Like, there's a lot of development things people get out of that, of just public speaking in front of people, having to go be like, I don't really know if this is right, but we'll just try it. Like, just try to forcing people out of that comfort zone a little bit. And so it's just been so cool to see, like, you see that development and then you see that almost come back where they're like, kind of like you said, this uncaged animal now where I'm just like, holy cow, like they're coming with all this stuff and it's amazing. And you're just able to absorb it and just find a way to like, hey, how do we put that in places to be able to scale that out, right? So it's a lot of fun to be able to like just see it all kind of come together in this crazy mess that we got.
Yeah, I love the mini trainings though. Yeah, like come do 3 slides on React. Like I love that. Like that's such like
Yeah,
a little bite size, but those are the little things that can click for a recruiter, and who knows, maybe they make 6 of those placements next year, and
yeah,
that's like 200K or 300K. Like it's those
yeah,
things in recruiting that's so fun. You could learn and have a direct ROI impact because now
yeah,
you get it, and that domino effect of the way it changes that you do the intake form or a candidate screen or everything else. You start getting leads from candidates, maybe,
yeah.
right? We did a 360 recruiting call last week in the group call. People's mind were blown. Like, wait, I can get leads from candidates? I'm like, yeah, you can. Like, yeah, that's a
All the
great way to
time.
get leads, all the time. So it's like, wow, like,
Yeah,
sweet. Like, all right, like this week, I was like, who's doing it? People started doing it. And like, yeah, I got a lead. I'm like, yeah, of course you did, right? Because it
yeah,
works. Like, those little things. I mean, we'll get into the training. The one last thing before we get into the coaching and the training
yeah,
topic that we want to get into is the work that you put in. Everyone knows recruiting is about timing, right? Oh, we're not hiring right now.
yeah.
We're hiring next quarter. So if you keep doing the work, you put yourself in the position to capitalize on the timing. And
One
like
hundred percent.
that is one of the biggest points of just sticking with it. You are then ready to like you're preparing to win.
Yeah,
And that's what people don't really they don't put in the work, they're not in it. You're not actually putting yourself. It's like if Tom Brady just never showed up on Sundays, like literally didn't go to the
yeah,
stadium. He could have been the best of all time, but no one would have known he wasn't in the game.
yeah,
Right? And so it's like that's the thing. Like you got to just be in it, and then think good things can happen. Right? If
yeah.
you have the right process and follow the playbook and everything else. But that's how you capitalize on timing. And I think there is a question sometimes of like, how do I know? It's like you don't.
Yeah.
You just
Not
don't. You just got to prepare for it.
Yeah, and it's always putting yourself, like you were saying, in that position, right? Like that's one of the biggest things. I mean, when COVID first happened and everything shut down, this last year, the market being how it was and stuff like that. I can't tell you how many people are like, oh, we're just gonna kind of wait it out. Like we're just kind of like just working a little less right now until it all comes back. And I'm just like, you're gonna miss it coming back, right? Like, it's like if you're watching a stock and you're like, hey, it's at $60. When it gets to 40, I'm all in, right? Then it goes to 35, and you're like, I don't want to touch it. And then all of a sudden it starts working itself back up and it's 40, 38, going back up. Next thing you know, it's back at 50 and you're like, I missed half the run, right? Recruiters are going to see that happen in the next year because they're going to be sitting there waiting to see it. It's not like this faucet's just going to turn back on, right? Like, we've seen it happening over the last 6 months of just like significantly coming back and stuff. And that's not, saying, oh, the whole market is, but it's just because of the work and the effort we've constantly been putting in. It's kind of like talking with the team where it's like, listen, we're heads down to get it. It sucks compared to other years, right? But we can sit here and complain about it, or we can keep positioning ourselves to capitalize on this when it's back. I mean, all things considered, like we've this last year barely even took a hit, really. Like it was all things considered, like held on pretty strong, and I think a lot of that. I think the models and kind of the flexibility of how we work with clients, I think, was pretty beneficial in that. I think just our recruiters, their skills, were played a huge role in that, and I think just also just we didn't stop, right? We just kept trucking along, and the things our recruiters and people have learned through this year are going to set them up far past everybody else moving forward because just the shit they've had to go through, right? And the things that they've had to figure out, and like you don't really know how to appreciate something until you've been on the other side of it, right? And the people that have just been sitting there just getting beat up, right? And just not even getting no's, just getting like nothing back, right? For
Nothing.
doing BD and outreach and stuff like that, they're beating themselves down, and you just have to be like, they're going to appreciate the other side so much more than they ever do, And we have recruiters here that started last year, right? And they're just like, holy cow, this is great. Why haven't I been doing a recruiter for 10 years? And I'm like, if you've had a phone, email, and a pulse, you made money last. You made more money than you've ever made recruiting last year, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's not normal. And so a lot of them that went like, that was year one and this is year two. And they're like, whoa. And like, it's hard work, right? Like, it just is what it is. But, you got to keep pushing forward. And you get that all the time as recruiters. You'll get your friend that's like, oh God, I should have been a recruiter. You just make a bunch of money and go to Vegas all the time, right? And you're like, yep, that's
That's
all I
exactly
do.
it.
Yep,
Yeah.
I go to Vegas and make a lot of money. I guess
Yeah.
that's cool. Like, thanks
Yeah.
for discrediting everything
Yeah.
else. And you saw the one weekend I went to Vegas in the last few years, and just okay, cool.
Yeah, everything else is
Yeah,
the gray, the hair loss, the weight
yeah,
gain, all that. I'm projecting now, but yeah, it's crazy. So it's so true. This is a good segue to a topic that I'm
yeah.
really excited to talk about. The initial post that you made, which for those, I think I brought it up. I'll read it off for a little
Oh
bit.
yeah,
Shocks me how many people with less than 5 years experience as a recruiter are trying to sell these recruiter training or recruiter branding programs, right? Those who can do, I guess saying those who can do, those who, and those who can't teach. More true than I thought, right? Brand and marketing is important, but supplementary to sales, right? Good old fashioned hard work, cold calling outpaces a fancy LinkedIn page all day. Which that I might actually disagree with you on in this current age, but I completely
yeah,
agree with the beginning pieces. I think I'm about starting a podcast, and that's why we're here now, right? I was like, dude, let's get on here. But to talk to us about the inspiration for that post
yeah.
because because it's great. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm always one to kind of call it out to a point and just be real, right? And I just said you see so many things get posted, and there's been so many that I'm like, you just want to respond to, and you're just like, just I'm staying out of it. It has nothing to do with me. It's not worth my
yeah,
time.
you got to stay focused, right? And
But
like not
yeah,
bring in that energy at times, but man, it's hard.
yeah, there's where you're just want a keyboard warrior back at them, right?
Yeah.
But this one kind of struck a chord because I was like, listen, like the market sucks. You have so many recruiters that are out of the jobs that traditionally should not have been, right? Like it wasn't due to their skill set, right? It was just companies lay off and had nothing to do with their performance necessarily. Some probably did, that's just going to be what it is. But a lot of people that are just down, right? It's been a tough year and all this, and then like the sharks come out, right? And they're just like, I look at it like they're just preying on these people that just don't like they'll do anything right now to turn this around. So they're traditionally wouldn't have given the time of day to these people, but now we're just like, I don't know, like okay, let's try it. And so I'd heard just some like stories, and there wasn't anyone like specific. There was a post I saw, and I was trying to remember before this call who it was. Figure we just call them out live, right? But I can't remember what it was. But yeah, they were posting this and about that, and I was just like, dude, like this needs to stop. Like you're looking at people that are posting these like recruiter training things, and you go look at their they've never been a recruiter. They've never done it, or it's the same thing where you get people that you get them reach out to you. Like if you go start an LLC, you'll start getting these emails. It's like they put you on some list, right, or something like they just. But it's just like these, help max, 10x your business, or I'll 5x your this, and I'm like, you don't even know what we do, like. How are you going to reach out? Like, I've taken some of those calls and just been like, I'm real curious. Like, so you know what I do? You know what we do every single day? Okay, how are you going to 10x that? I want to know that right now. It's like, well, and I'm like, so you don't. Like, don't lead with that. And it kind of goes into like the BD on the recruiter side, that we teach people. But it's like, you understanding people's pain points and stuff like that, but you also need to be able to listen. You don't know it all going in, and you got to be open to that. But I'd just seen so much of it, and people that like you'd see recruiters on it, just like, oh, like I'd love to try this, like and stuff. And there's specific ones where I'd reach out to people like, do not like I don't know that person, but don't pay them a dime. Like
Yeah.
they've never been a recruiter. This is my 2 second read on their background, right? How are they going to teach you how to do this? It's the same people that were coming out saying, the ATSs were, there's an
The
algorithm within the
AI or
ATS.
whatever. Yeah.
That made me like second. I'm like, I've worked inside every single ATS, and I'm like, wait a second, have these things been like not showing me all the profiles? Like, what's going
Yeah.
on here? I had to like second guess myself. People were like so adamant about this, and I'm just like, no, that is not true. Like, a human said you're not a fit. They might have sent you an automated response, like an email that just, I hit ignore or no, and it just sends them out a rejection email. That probably happened, but there's no algorithm, and that's how people selling that, right? I'll help you, like
Beat the
SEO,
AI, beat the
keyword,
ATS. Yeah.
keyword your resume so the AI doesn't, auto reject you. And I'm like, so it's just all that built up, and I'm like, this needs to stop. Like, I'm just gonna say something about it, right? And just kind of call it out. And I've reached out to people that comment on those things, and it'll just like, I'll reach out to them privately, right? And just kind of be like, listen, like this is all not true. Like, happy to jump on a call with you and explain this. Like, do not fall for this trap. Like, it is a waste of your time and money and stuff. And so it's just you see that like people, opportunists come out and like prey on people who are just like literally going through some shit right now. And so it's just kind of one of those where you're like, I got to say something, right? I'm not okay with that.
I,
So that's what led to that. Yeah.
No, I loved it. Like I saw it and I was like, "Ooh, yes!" And I was like, "Man, did Darren look at my profile? Because I was only an air tech just about 5 years." I was like, "Is he calling me out? Like, what happened?" Right? Like I like just like you with the ATS. Like I had a moment. I'm like, "Wait, have I
Yeah.
recruited before? Have I sold before?" Like I was questioning my own resume. And
I
so
think I was gonna put on there. I think I had a line on the bottom. I thought maybe I took it out, but I think it said something like, "If you think I'm talking about you, I probably am."
yeah,
Just because I thought mess with a lot of people. They'd be
this
like,
is
"Wait,
messing with
like,
my head. Yeah, I was like, "Oh, you got me." So but it's look, I'd be lying if this is something I don't think of every single week, and
yeah,
typically sometimes every single day. Like, there's a huge responsibility as a coach and having a training program of, am I full of it, dude? Are you kidding me? I've had imposter syndrome for sure.
yeah,
I didn't hit a president's club at Aerotech, like straight up,
yeah,
like I, I just didn't. Like I got a world class NPS score for for my clients and my ratings and everything else. There's a lot of reasons why I didn't hit. I think part of the cage lion sapped my motivation, and I didn't make as many calls and many emails because I was
yeah,
like, the fruits aren't worth it to me. I don't care about a coworker vacation in Cancun and the money. Then they changed the comp plan. I was like, these incentives don't drive me. And I had to
yeah,
be honest about that. And I got burnt out and I came back to it and to recruiting, and I was like, "Well, I know way more than I realized. Like maybe
yeah,
like people could learn from this." And I was like, then I learned the automation and the content. I'm like, this is a cheat code. I got to teach recruiters, but I taught the automation and content because personally, I was like, am I good enough to teach some of the sales stuff? And
yeah,
then I realized, like, wait, dummy, like you've been selling, you sold a different, like you've done it. But
yeah,
there's legit reasons. I don't say I hit things that I didn't. I don't,
yeah,
it's just like you gotta just be, if people would say like, "Oh, you're authentic," it's just like I just had to be honest. Like if I'm gonna
yeah,
do this, I'm just gonna tell the truth that and I'm gonna tell about my experiences and what
yeah,
I know. And sometimes I didn't share it all. Like I don't think I've ever shared that before until
yeah,
this podcast. But I don't care because I've helped enough people do this. And the
yeah,
promise isn't like 5 million, 10. I know those people. Like I know those people come to me. They tell me what they were promised and pitched and
yeah,
money back, and then they do everything they can to not give you your money back for
yeah,
100K in 90 days or what. All these crazy promises. But I was like, I had to be honest every step of the way. It is
yeah,
really hard in the beginning. And this year, I was just like, all right, I can't just teach automation content without teaching sales. So
yeah,
I was like, I like Rachel Brown's a case study. I just told her, I'm going to teach you everything I know about sales. She 4X'd her business this year. And she's
yeah,
like, I gave two crowds like, sweet. And there's a few other people like that, right? That we've had that. We haven't built that whole case study. I'm like, oh, so yeah, I do know, like, I can teach,
yeah,
like, I can do this and I can teach it. That environment at that time, to be honest, I wasn't ready enough. Then,
yeah,
honestly, one of the things about being an entrepreneur, I became way more disciplined. One thing about having a family, I became way more disciplined than I was 7 years ago, right? Aerotech. So it's like,
yeah,
it just wasn't the right time. And actually, in doing that, made me better now, like, in a sense, like, for that. So it's just like an interesting time. But those are the nuances that, like, I work at every single day to figure out
yeah,
and to be honest and be like, am I doing the right thing? And sometimes my impact has not been what my intent was, and I get that.
yeah,
But that's where I have to learn from. And I think it's good that you call it out because to me, if you're not at that level, a standard of thinking about it, auditing yourself, like you shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah,
And like that's what it takes. So I love it because that hopefully for me it helps weed people out. I want people to look at our stuff
100%.
and talk to me and all that. Be like, you know what? There's a lot of bullshit out there, but like at least that guy told me the truth. Like that's refreshing. And then you might not buy from me, and that's okay. But if I can give you that experience, like that's a start.
Yeah. Well, I think just the openness to it, right? And like you said, I think at the end of the day, you doing it the right way and doing it for the right intentions and continuously trying to improve yourself and actually like trying to give these people like the skills that they need to go do this job, right? Like is so far superior to what these other people that are just trying to scam them out of something or you know give them some brief little tutorial that's not going to teach them anything and stuff like that. And like you said, it's good because it just calls it out, right? And it weeds it out. I tell recruiters, like, people that all the time, like the recruiters, the biggest objection you overcome as a recruiter is someone else's bad experience with a different recruiter, right?
Yes.
Because it's not like, oh, I worked with a recruiter and they sucked and I don't like you now, and you're like, sweet, okay, let's win you over. This is gonna be fun. But
That's
it's
where
the same thing with
content
yes,
works. That's where content works, my friend.
yes. I know with your sales, of course, but
Yes. Absolutely, absolutely. I
yeah,
interrupted. It's definitely the
no, no,
combo.
you're
It's definitely the combo for
well,
sure.
and that's where I think when we were messaging back and forth about it, is what we kind of said is it was just like, and my example was kind of like just this extreme example that proves my point, right? It was one of those where it's like
Yeah.
obviously it was just like if you do no sales and all content or like just a super pretty LinkedIn page, your company will suffer. If you do, don't focus on the content or that, and the branding and stuff like that, but you're just heads down on sales, like your company will do okay, right? And the point was that like one can't probably like sales could probably live without the other technically, but yes, and you absolutely need both. And you see us, I mean, we put our stuff out, and so that's whenever we were going back and forth. I'm like, I mean, I'm kind of being hypocritical because like I am about the content, but my point right now is different.
No,
But
you're making a great point, and like
yeah,
that's what. And again, it's illustrating, and there's a thing with blanket statement. I mean, you're saying it as you're posting on LinkedIn, so obviously
yeah,
you know the drill, like you know the
yeah,
game, right? But you're right, sales has got to come first, and that's what I told you offline. That's what I'll say online is that was the
yeah.
biggest realization I had in 2023 was I gotta teach people everything I know about sales, everything
Yeah,
I've learned, getting my ass beat, but the successes, what worked, how I was
yeah,
terrible the first 2 years. Thought I was going to be an amazing manager because I like people, and that is not how that works. And
right.
everything else, like there's a
I got a funny
whole,
story about that actually.
there's a
I'll tell
whole,
you.
there's a whole thing, right? So it's just like, okay, we got to do sales, then we can automate, then we can do some content, like. But there's an
Yeah,
order of operation, so we've revamped everything, like courses that are coming out and all that to like have that focus because it had to be. I just got
yeah,
excited about automation and content. Almost
yeah,
like forgot, like, oh wait, like people don't know all this. All right, so let's teach them all this stuff first. So we got
yeah,
me, we got Keely, like on the front coaching them sales and all that. Then we got the content team, but there's an order of operations, and now it's
yeah,
just like, okay, we're giving people a chance. And like I
yeah,
feel that way because like it has to happen because people were gonna be like, okay, I got to something like now what? Well, now you get to work.
yeah,
Like you're like, what do I do with automation content? Doesn't money fall out of the sky? Like, no, now the work begins. This just makes it
yeah,
easier. Right. This just makes it like you're leveraging your strengths. It makes your cold outreach easier and all that stuff just
yeah,
simpler. So you can actually do more. Right. If you can take care of top and middle of the funnel, you're spending more time at bottom of the funnel. That's where you want to be. And
yeah,
like, but the work doesn't stop. It's not 4 hour work week. Like
yeah,
you gotta go here. Like it's still 40-hour work week, if some. Like, but it's just way more closer to the money, way more fulfilling, better clients, all that good
yeah.
stuff. So I'll
Well,
stop
and
there. I know you want to
yeah.
share. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say the inverse to it that touches probably that where there's a ton of examples of companies out there that don't have the sales necessarily but have the content and their name, right, and there is totally a value to that, right? I mean, you look at I can't tell you how many people ask when they find out, oh, you're a recruiter, like, oh, like ZipRecruiter, and you're just like, no, not like ZipRecruiter, but I get it. You've seen the commercial. Okay, I get where you're going here. But that I think is a good example of content and marketing and sales that's out there, or marketing that's out there that, obviously not directly correlated to like what we're talking about, but kind of in a roundabout way of like, I can't tell you how many times, you'll hear about a company or we know companies and you'll start working with that company. And I'm like, I thought you guys like had it together, right? And you're just like, this company's just a mess and has no idea what they're doing and they're going to go under quick. But, they had all their money in content and all that stuff and branding. And so like, I guess my point to that is not to knock on content branding, is showing that that can absolutely, without sales, also the awareness and I see your name everywhere. They must be doing well and stuff. So there's 100% that value, and I think when you get them right, together, and the sales side, why I always just stress on that more is a lot of people I think have learned this year how tough it is, right? But didn't realize it. And I've talked like so many recruiters that we talk to that have kind of done their own firms or kind of just done their own thing over the last year. With everything that like, it's all the same thing. Like yeah, I got laid off or I left the company I was at, and I just kind of started consulting. And next thing I knew, I had like 4 or 5 clients paying me full time, and I was doing all this. And so I hired a sourcer. I'm like, this was amazing, and I'm going to spin a firm out of this and all this, and then now they're just like, and then 2023 happens, and they're like, BD's tough. Like I didn't have to try for get companies last time. It was all through referrals or people I knew or my network, and now it's like they won't even touch me. And
Yep.
so like after a lot of them, like that's that's the realization of the BD's tough. That is hands down the hardest part of this job. Like recruiting is the easiest part of our job if you're comparing it to the BD side, and like obviously there's a lot of skills and things you can get in there, but like if I give you a search and a role and say, here's what we need, here's what they're looking for, go find me someone like this. Like you can go heads down and just like, I'm gonna get you some profiles, I'm gonna get you some candidates, I'm gonna get them. Like I know how to do that. That's easy. The BD side is like that. I mean, that's just where it is tough, and you have to, if you haven't been taught how to do it, it's going to be really tough to learn on your own or to stay motivated because you're just, you're going to get beat up by it and stuff like that. It's so hard. And so it's one of those things that people just, I think, I've come to the realization with, and I think have been humbled significantly by it, that it's, that needs to happen all the time if you're going to try and run a firm or build something out. And it's just a lot of things that a lot of recruiters haven't ever had to do. A lot of internal recruiters that have always just been internal with companies, they've never had to do BD. They're really good at the recruiting side, or really good at probably like the understanding how the company is going to work internally and working with the hiring managers and building all those processes and workflows out. They know how to do BD. And then there's a lot of recruiters on the external side that have always done BD, and they're trying to do this consulting thing now, and they're probably not that strong at like really working on the internal side with a company because they've never done that. So it's kind of these difference of experiences that people are kind of trying to blend right now, and getting, I think, humbled in their areas of weakness.
There are, and some are reaching out for support, and I think the ones that are humble about it, and
Yeah,
hey, where can I get training and coaching, and whether you work with us or someone else, people, right? It's a
yeah,
paid mentor or free mentor or whatever it looks like going to figure that out and just understanding there's so many pieces to having a well-rounded game in this
yeah,
business, in this industry. And what we're there to provide is just like that kind of, I always say, like the staples, like the easy button, right?
yeah,
Like you could buy a course and all that, and I strongly encourage it's a pre-order price. No, I'm just kidding. But like I'm not kidding. It is like you should buy it. But like people work with us one-on-one because they're like, they know they can text me, they can call me, they can message
yeah,
me or one of the other coaches, and they're gonna get an immediate response to that immediate scenario that's come up. And
yeah,
as we talked about earlier, that could be the moment where it clicks. Like
yeah,
those are the learning, the scenarios, and like, oh, I can handle that scenario well, or I could try a new process, and I have the forum to talk about it on a group call or a one-on-one call. Hey, I tried
yeah,
this, and guess what? It worked. Like I couldn't believe it. Like I
yeah,
didn't know if this process was gonna work. Like we had someone like that yesterday that did the discovery call the way we teach it, right? Getting curious, digging, learning about them. Stop pitching yourself and what you do.
yeah,
No one cares,
yeah.
right?
Nobody,
Like
not at all.
like look at the people that are posting, it's been open for 30 days and all that, instead of just pitching them, being like, what have you tried, how have you been looking
Yeah,
for it, hey, let's talk about it. Yeah, we place a few of those. Like I would love to kind of learn where your challenges have been and hear your
yeah,
perspective on it. Sure enough, they were working with other agencies. They had multiple companies in the same industry, and
yeah,
she dug in, she knew all his problems. So she sent the contract, she got an email back saying, not only will I sign this contract, I need you to write another one for my other company. So we have that agreement in
yeah.
place. Right. But like
That's
that's what
perfect.
happened. She had never done that before. She's
Yeah,
like, she counted it as a small win yesterday on the call. I'm like, that's about as big of a win as it
yeah,
gets,
yeah,
because
yeah,
that approach shift changes the rest of your career,
yeah,
right? And however you get those, if you and you know yourself as a learner, if it's a one-on-one, is it group, is it courses, right? People are different. Like
yeah,
just lean into it and go do it, and like
yeah.
just go make it happen, because what's on the other side if you break through is life changing, absolutely
Yeah.
life changing.
And just how you approached everything and all of that, because that's one of the biggest things. And it's you kind of put yourself right in like the company shoes that you're reaching out to, and it's we work with our recruiters all the time of like, you need to have the confidence, understand the value that you're adding. Like we do a
Yes.
very good job at what we do, and you need to be able to like understand that you're not just calling this number to call a number, right? Or just doing it because someone told you to. Like you need to be able to look at that and really understand. Like I'm going to drive a value here. Like I know this role. I'm going to find these people, and like they are going to get a benefit from working with me, and that confidence needs to be able to come out, right? And then
Yes.
from there, it's doing the research, and I don't mean hours of research or just understanding. Like when you look at a company and you're going to reach out to them, like what's that process? How do you evaluate that company real quick? Go look at their current, what's the team size? Okay, how many internal recruiters do they have? Or, how many people, jump on LinkedIn if you got a recruiter so you can see who they've hired in the last 12 months. How many people have they hired? How long have these roles been open? Like you kind of just, you're going to have whatever process you have that you kind of quickly evaluate and go, here's my in. Okay, I'm going to approach it this way, and being able to do that. But then, yeah, when you're talking with the companies, like understand that that's a human on the other side of that phone, and like, like actually, like, how's their day going? Like, what are the pain points they're saying? Real curious, like, and diving into those areas and not just saying like, hey, I do this and this is my company and this is why we're so great and all this and when you sign this agreement, and they're just going to be like, no, like, and if they do, they're not the client you want in the first place, right? Like you want the client that's going to sit there and get into the roles with you and really go into detail and invest. If they can invest 30 minutes with you to go over these roles, they're wasting your time.
Yeah, that's it. It's just
Yeah,
be having those boundaries, like having that value, having those boundaries, sticking to them. That'll do more for your confidence than anything. And you will find the right people if you stay with
yeah,
it, right? Stay with the connection, stay with the calls, stay with the content. Like you will get it. You will turn the tide
yeah,
and stick with it. And to add to that, we were talking about coaches before, like vet
yeah,
people, like be like again, it goes with having your own boundaries and remove yourself from kind of that emotional state as much as you can. And this is me saying this, right? Like I'm
yeah,
telling you how basically not to like, but like seriously, like vet people, like, and I would
yeah,
say like go hire, go work with whoever you're going to listen to and that you're
yeah,
going to take the coaching from. That's the person to sign up with. If that's
yeah,
not me, that's okay. But go to someone that is, because someone else might be better to get you to a certain point, and then maybe I take the baton from there. Right, because
yeah,
I've had a few of those too, and like that's totally fine, right? I'm gonna keep working on my game because I'm not hung up on one lead. Again, that's what
yeah,
you get with the abundance mentality and build the pipeline and all that stuff. It's like you can have that, and so vet people that already have that, because those are the people that are telling you the truth and that are
yeah,
honest, because they're not trying to say what they think you want to hear, right? Like that, and there's a difference there. We all know it because we all get
yeah,
bombarded with pitches and emails and commercials and all that. So like the truth always resonates and it always
yeah,
cuts through all the noise,
yeah,
right? And so like have that standard for yourself, even when it's scary and everything else. Like you do that, and that's number one. You can get the right mentor, but number two, that's how you're going to get the right clients as well.
yeah.
Like it's all a trickle effect.
Yeah, and it's being able to make the investment in yourself, right, and the sacrifice, and that's not, obviously in some cases that's financial, right, that investment, but the investment in terms of like time, effort, energy, stress, and like you need like what sacrifice are you willing to make? Because we hear that all the time, right? Like, oh, I want to do this, I want to earn this, I want to make this, I should make more money, and I'm like, well, what are you doing?
To
What
do it.
sacrifices are you making? And that's where I think a lot of stuff from sports comes, is right, like what sacrifices you make? Well, a lot of sacrifices. I mean, try going through college where half your college life is not college life, and there's a lot of great things we got to do with football and places we traveled and saw. And I mean, it was amazing, right? But there's a lot of sacrifices in there, right? Oh, you couldn't go do this with your friends, or everyone's going to Cabo for the weekend, and you got a game, and it's just all those things, and it correlates into your professional life too. Like, what sacrifice are you making? Are you spending any time outside of the designated work hours of your job to perfect your craft?
Yeah.
Are you even reaching out to ask for help? Is a step in the right direction, right? Understanding that, okay, I need to leverage someone else's experience, and kind of like with what you talk, and how some are one on one, and how your guys' program works and stuff like that. I know I don't know a whole lot about it, but the group stuff, like everyone should be leveraging that group conversation, right? In my opinion, like, because one, you need to be able to get out of your comfort zone. So if you want to do the one on one because it's like you
Safe.
don't want to have other, yeah,
Yeah.
it's safe, like great, do that, break your boundaries. But even if it's also doing the group stuff, is one, it's going to break you out of your comfort zone. Two, you are going to hear so many other people, like, you have 30 people in a group that are all going to tell you about how their 25-minute call went and what didn't go well and what did. And now you've absorbed that, you've learned that without having to spend 30, that's 10 hours of total experience time that you just were able to gain by hearing what other people went through and how they overcame that. And you're going to be on a call and be put in that scenario and be able to draw back to that and say, oh, like, here's a good rebuttal to that. Here's a good way to overcome that objection. Here's a good way to explain that in more detail. And you're going to be able to leverage someone else's time and effort and failure or success or whatever it was, and without you actually having to go through that. And it's huge to be able to like to gain that. And I think that's a lot of things that a lot of people don't realize that you're gaining from that in a lot of those group settings and stuff like
I mean, I'm gonna hire you to be a salesperson for
that.
us,
Yeah.
but
I
you're
want a
gonna start
percentage of anyone that signs up after
yeah.
this
No, you'll
podcast.
get a percentage. You'll get a percentage. You covered it perfectly. I'll send you a couple of the group calls that we've had because
Yeah,
they've been dynamite the last like
yeah,
3 or 4 months when we've really made like sales on Tuesdays, content on Thursdays, but
yeah,
there's always connecting themes every week
yeah,
because sales is content, content is sales. I made a post about
yeah.
the Jim Carrey, right? Finkel's eye horn
Oh,
is
yeah,
Finkel,
that's
right? Like
awesome.
the whole thing because it is they're tied together. I mean,
Yeah,
content really marketing, right? It's the yin and yang, and they got to be able to work in. If they work in sync, that's like when you're
yeah,
really maximizing everything. And then you get the right operations in place, and that's what we've been overhauling is that piece,
yeah,
right? To get more out of the calls, to get more of that library going, and to get that workflow right. The operations is key because those group call settings, that's what we're finding. We want to make it
yeah,
easier for people to access that information, to look back, to build a library and clips of all that stuff because there
yeah,
is so much good in there and the way people are learning. And that's the feedback we're getting. What you said is just
yeah,
like, oh, I learned it hearing someone else go through it. I'm like, I can apply it, right? I've had like
yeah,
veterans show up to these calls recently thinking like, oh, am I going to learn anything new? Like that was an awesome call. And like,
yeah,
that's what we're building this thing to is like, what's going on? This stuff is hard. Like 360 calls, like
yeah,
content and headlines and interacting in the comments and follow-ups and cadences. And what do you say on this cold call and this email? And like, it's all just like the fine tuning and internalizing the approach of just like, you're constantly digging and you're not sacrificing the numbers game,
yeah,
right? But you're digging with the right approach. You always have the numbers, so you could just always generate good conversations every day. Like
yeah,
you do that at scale, you're gonna have a great business, like and
yeah,
a great life, and it's gonna give you time to shore up all the other things, right?
yeah.
Operations and everything else, kind of all that good stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah,
When I could imagine some of the experienced people probably get the most out of it, right? Because, a lot of, yeah, right, your experience, you know everything, right? You're not going to learn anything. You go into that, but a lot of the times it's, well, you just been doing what you've been doing. You haven't been open to trying something new. And the ignorance is bliss is a phrase for a reason, right? I mean, there's someone that came into this and they had no experience and tried something and it worked. And you're like, I would have never thought that worked. Like they didn't know any better, so they just ran straight into a wall and it worked out, right? And so it's like there's a lot of those things that you sit there and go like, I would have not thought that worked, but it did. Like that happens all the time. There's recruiters that we have here that like some of their pitches or how they'll reach out about BD or the things they'll call out, or even just some like how they write the messages, right? I'm like, I don't like the look of that, like but I have to just you got to kind of let like I'm a big component of like controlled failure. Like you kind of have to let people just try something new. And like if you want to figure out hey, how should I respond to this email? I'm always like, why don't you respond to it, but send it to me. Don't hit reply yet, but I want you to take the time, have an original thought, right? Like digest what that says. What do you think you should respond with? And then send it to me, and then we'll walk through, and I'll help. Hey, I'd probably go this approach or this, or change this to this. This would be a better way to get that point across. But like, just the fact of having someone go through that process and like just try something, right? Even if it's wrong, they're going to learn and retain so much more of that little lesson than if I just said, hey, let me send you, I'll just forward you what to say, right? Because they're
yeah.
never going to learn it, right? And so I think a lot of those sessions, yeah, there's people, some of the people with the most experience probably have the most to learn or gain from those because they also have the experience to be able to go implement that after and go, oh, that's a good idea. I can immediately do that tomorrow on this next call I have because they already have the skill set and that they're leveraging to have those calls set up and stuff.
There's two things to that point. Some of the fastest ROI, I guess, right,
Yeah,
wins have been from veteran recruiters coming
yeah,
in and the light bulb goes and they have this whole network already built that they
yeah,
can use the strategy and tactics on. They're like, oh, and it just amplified everything. Like, so you talk about
yeah,
10x, like that's actually how you get it at that level. Because like, oh, is it for
yeah,
beginners? I was like, it's not because like it's like if it's you haven't really used LinkedIn or automation or tried to approach or like seen like a really like evaluated your pipeline and like
yeah,
old clients and all that, like there's probably stuff in there that we can find. Like I almost always find something,
yeah,
right? But if you're new, right, it's that foundation and kind of just learning. And as you said,
yeah,
that's what we have like support tickets, right? So people submit, hey, this is what I was going to say, or this is what I want to post, and then a coach gives them feedback, right,
yeah,
on that. It's the same thing. I want you to come up with it from everything we've taught you, and I want to see because it shows me how you're thinking about this,
yeah,
and then I can kind
100%.
of help you the best way you need to be helped,
Yeah.
right? Versus just
Yeah.
me just fire hosing you with stuff, which
Yeah.
I still do at times. Don't get me
I
wrong,
yeah.
you're right, and it's
Guilt.
gonna happen, but it's like you gotta kind of break that up a little bit too.
Yeah. Yeah. Guilty of that, where you start
Y-
answering it, and then 10 minutes later, you're like, "How did we get here?" And they're
Yeah.
like, "You just haven't stopped talking." And I'm like,
Mhm.
"Okay, I'm gonna go back to work over here." Like, my bad.
Guilty, guilty. Yep. And I see it in the eyes. They're like, "Well, that was dense." I was like,
Yeah.
"Yeah," but I was like, "It's recorded. You'll go back to it." And I get people like that,
Yeah.
like a year or 2 years later. They're like, "Oh, this finally clicked for me." I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
really? Like, interesting. Like, I thought that would have clicked for you right away, but like, it's all good, right?
Yeah.
You got to allow for all the craziness and everything else in our life.
Oh
Not
yeah.
everything is gonna click the way we want it to click." And I had
Yeah.
one member say, "If I get 10% takeaway from these calls, I'm happy." Because there's
Yeah.
always so much. He's like, but if
Yeah.
10% I can implement right away, I'm happy. Right? It's a little
Yeah.
bit better every single day. And I'm like, that's a good manageable way to look at it. So
Yeah. Exactly.
uh,
You just got to absorb something each time. Just something little
yeah,
thing that you can take. Yeah.
I appreciate it. Well, let's wrap it up. Well, I guess one
Yeah.
thing to leave, let's just say like an agency owner with, right? Like
Yeah.
one piece of advice, you go back to September 2018, you're like, oh man, I should have done that, or I should have looked at that first.
Yeah.
What would that be?
Oh god, there's a lot there. We've I
Yeah,
always tell everyone I do not have all the answers, but we've made plenty of mistakes, right?
yeah,
Plenty of fines, not having employment stuff done right, and all that. But I would say like really look at like what you want to start building on this. Like in what benefit do you want this company to provide to the people you're going to hire? You know, and yeah, it might be a little bit of putting the cart in front of the horse, but I think that really is what allows you to start building kind of like that vision and mission of what you're looking to build, and what value you're going to add to other people that are going to be able to come here, and how you're going to do that. I think it's huge, and probably the biggest thing is like we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Like it's hard work. It'll be the hardest thing you've ever done. It is going to cut into you outside of 8 to 5 hours. It is going to cut into family time and sacrificing things like that. And I'm not saying like the only way to be successful is to make those sacrifices and stuff like that. There's obviously the option of just not doing it, but you just need to go into it expecting like this is going to be a lot of work, and if you're not willing to put it in, like don't try, until you're ready to do that really, because it just is going to require a lot from you, and from that, I would say every single person is capable of doing it, right? It's not a special person. It's just someone that's really going to put in that like effort and to do that. But that's probably the biggest thing I would leave it with is like just be ready to do whatever you have to do, and be confident that you're gonna just you're gonna run into walls, figure out how to get around
yep, that's it. I love it. That's a great takeaway. It's great
them. I was trying to
advice.
condense a
That's
lot into one little comment.
yeah.
Like, where
Yeah,
did I
the
go with this?
digital recruiter mindset even way before all this. So
Yeah,
it's that's I'm not surprised. I mean, if you guys didn't know, I mean, this is really the first time Darren and I talked on a call,
yeah,
and we've done an hour and 12 here. This is like most like the longest running podcast we've done. So
that
again,
was
I think
awesome.
if you see that on LinkedIn and you see someone's post and you connect, reach out to them. Right, all
Yeah,
these amazing takeaways that you just had. Like I wouldn't have had that if I didn't reach out and the comment and all that. I mean, this is going to be such a value add for
yeah,
our listeners. So, Darren, I appreciate you, man, for being willing to hop on here and just sharing gem after gem after gem. There's a lot of good stuff in here, man, and congrats on your success. I know there's more to
yeah.
come, and dude, I'm just glad that we're connected. We know each other now, man.
Yeah, no, I am as well, and I guess it all worked out to your favor, right? Because you just got to prove that content is works for the sales, right? Because
Yeah,
content is
I
what
did
led
the
us all
master
here.
with the puppet strings back here and over here. I wish I could tell you
I see what
I'm
you're
that
doing, right?
smart, but I'm not. Uh, I'm
No,
terrible
I
at
look
hiding it.
forward to
Yeah.
yeah. No, I look forward to obviously continue the friendship and getting to know you better. This is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thanks, Darren. I appreciate it, man. And thanks for listening, tuning in. Give all the ratings and all that if you liked it. And we'll have Darren's LinkedIn and website on the episode page. So connect with him. Check out their website. He's doing some really cool stuff. And there's a lot that you can learn from, obviously, as you just heard. So appreciate it. Until next time, happy
Yeah,
hunting, guys.
yeah.
Bye.